There's a story I want to share with you today. It's not mine, but it is one that carries lessons about trust, betrayal, and the quiet strength that comes when someone finally chooses to stand up for themselves. Her name was Caroline Whitman. For years, she believed she was living what many might call a dream. She was 38 years old, an accomplished author with her own books on the shelves, living in a beautiful Manhattan brownstone. By her side was her husband, Mark, a man whose charm and soft voice could ease away her worries with just a word. Each morning he would kiss her forehead before work, bringing her coffee just the way she liked it. Each evening, he would whisper how she was his world. Caroline believed him. She trusted him completely. But, as I've seen too often in life, trust can sometimes be the very rope a betrayer uses to pull the ground from beneath you. One night, long after midnight, Caroline woke to an empty bed. At first, she thought nothing of it. Perhaps he was in the kitchen, or restless and unable to sleep. But then she heard it. His voice. It came from his office down the hall. Low, serious, almost cold. "She still doesn't suspect anything," Mark said. Caroline froze in place. The man she trusted most was speaking as though he was planning something against her. She listened harder. "Everything's going as planned. Almost done." Her chest tightened. She crept back to bed before he returned, lying as still as she could, pretending to sleep. And when he slipped back under the covers, calm and casual, she stared at the ceiling in silence. That night, she realized she was living beside a stranger. The next morning, Caroline moved through her kitchen like a ghost. Mark was still asleep upstairs, but she couldn't shake the words she had overheard. For years, she had left every bill, every investment, every detail of their finances in his hands. That was what she believed a good wife was supposed to do. Trust. But that morning, she opened the banking app on her phone for the very first time. What she saw nearly made her knees give out. There were withdrawals scattered across the past 3 months. 500 here, 1,000 there, 2,000 more. Dozens of them. Small enough to escape notice, but together, they painted a dark picture. Her breath caught in her throat just as she heard his footsteps behind her. "Checking the account this early?" Mark's voice was casual, but she caught a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Just curious," she replied softly, trying to steady her hands. "Some of these charges look unfamiliar." He poured himself a cup of coffee and smiled, the kind of smile that looked practiced. "A few small investments. Must have slipped my mind." Caroline nodded as though she accepted his explanation. But inside, something changed. Her love had been replaced with clarity. She realized she could no longer take his words at face value. That evening, she noticed more. He carried his phone like it was welded to his hand, always turned face down on the table, always stepping out to take calls. When she asked what he was working on, he would smile again. "Just business. Nothing for you to worry about." But now she was worried. Deeply. And for the first time in years, she wasn't going to ignore that worry. 2 nights later, fate handed Caroline an opportunity. Mark had just finished dinner and gone upstairs for a shower. Normally, his phone never left his side, but that evening he left it sitting on the dining table. Caroline stared at it, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of running water echoed from upstairs. She hesitated for a long moment, then reached for it. The screen was unlocked. Most of the messages looked ordinary. Work reminders, casual chats. But then she saw one thread without a name, just a number. The most recent message stopped her cold. Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done. Her hand trembled. Who was her? Was it Caroline? What were the Ilium files? The words wrapped around her like a storm cloud. She placed the phone back exactly where it had been, careful not to disturb a thing. She splashed cold water on her face in the kitchen sink, staring at her reflection in the darkened window. That night, when Mark came to bed, he kissed her forehead like always. "You okay?" he asked. His voice was soft, almost tender. Caroline forced a smile. Just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was awake now. Wide awake. He believed she was still in the dark, and that, she realized, would be his greatest mistake. The very next morning, once Mark had left for work, Caroline made a call that would change everything. She dialed Anna Prescott, her old friend from college. Anna wasn't just any friend, she was a sharp estate attorney, someone who knew the ins and outs of protecting assets. Caroline's voice shook as she explained what she had discovered. The late-night phone calls, the withdrawals, the strange message about the Ilium files. Anna didn't interrupt. She listened quietly, then asked one simple question. "How much money are we talking about?" Caroline swallowed hard. "Close to 5 million. There was silence on the line. Then Anna's voice came back firm and steady. "Caroline, we move your assets now. If you wait, you could lose everything." Caroline sat on the edge of her couch, her hands trembling. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Absolutely. We'll create a trust in your name. It will be legally untouchable. He won't be able to get near it." That afternoon, the process began. Papers were signed. Accounts shifted. Property titles moved into her trust. For 3 days, Caroline lived in a blur of signatures and hushed phone calls. And when Mark returned home with his usual calm smile, carrying dinner takeout like nothing had changed, she met him at the door. He had no idea the fortress around her life had already been built. Just a few days later, Mark made his move. He came home early on a Friday evening, dressed in one of his sharp suits, looking calm, almost smug. He sat across from Caroline at the dining table and slid a folder toward her. Inside were divorce papers. "I think it's for the best," he said smoothly, his voice rehearsed. "We've grown apart. I don't want things to become more painful." Caroline looked up at him, her expression steady, her face unreadable. "Really?" she asked quietly. For the briefest moment, he faltered. But then he regained his composure. "Yes, it's better this way." Caroline took a slow breath, closed the folder, and pushed it back toward him. "Before we go any further," she said calmly, "there's something you should know." His brow furrowed. "What's that?" She leaned forward, her voice low and deliberate. "I've already moved everything. The apartment, the accounts, the royalties. All of it is in a protected trust now. You can't touch it." For the first time in their marriage, she watched the color drain from his face. What do you mean?" he stammered. "I mean," she said firmly, "you don't get to hand me divorce papers and walk away with half my life." His jaw tightened, his hand clenched around the folder. "You can't do that." Caroline's voice was steady. "I already did." Mark stared at her, searching for weakness, but she gave him none. Finally, he rose from the table, his tone cold and sharp. "Then we'll see each other in court." She stood too, meeting his eyes. "Go ahead. Try." For the first time in weeks, Caroline exhaled freely. He now knew. She wasn't the woman he could control anymore. Caroline thought the worst had passed. She had protected her assets, faced her husband's betrayal, and stood her ground. But 3 days later, she discovered Mark hadn't finished with her yet. At the office, whispers began to swirl. Colleagues avoided her eyes. Then her assistant, Rachel, walked into her office holding a sheet of paper, her face pale. "I think you need to see this," Rachel said. It was a screenshot from an online forum. The post claimed that an unnamed executive had hidden company money to protect herself during a divorce. At the bottom, someone had added a comment that named her directly. Caroline Whitman. Her hands shook as she read it. The accusation was false, but the damage could be devastating. She looked up at Rachel, her voice barely above a whisper. This was him. Mark did this. Rachel nodded. "If this spreads, it could ruin your career." Caroline paced the room, her chest tight. She had spent years building her reputation with integrity, every step earned through her own work. And now, one lie threatened to shatter it. That evening, she met with Anna again. Her friend listened carefully as Caroline poured out the latest development. "He's trying to destroy me professionally," Caroline said, her voice trembling between fear and anger. Anna leaned back in her chair, her expression sharp. "This is pressure. He wants you scared enough to settle. He wants you to give up." Caroline met her gaze, her voice steady this time. "I'm not backing down." Anna gave a small nod. "Then we fight. First step, a cease and desist. If he pushes further, we sue for defamation." Caroline felt a spark of strength flicker within her. Mark had underestimated her again. He thought she would fold under the weight of lies. But this time, she wasn't going anywhere. Just when Caroline thought she had seen the worst of Mark's tricks, he struck even lower. 3 days later, Anna called her into the office. Anna's voice was clipped, serious. "He just filed a lawsuit," she said. "He's accusing you of financial fraud." Caroline's breath caught. "What? That's absurd." Anna slid a folder across the desk. "He claims you illegally moved marital assets. He's alleging embezzlement. And he's not acting alone." Caroline opened the folder. The name hit her like a blow. Ilomero. It was the same name she had seen in that mysterious text message on Mark's phone. Anna explained, her arms folded tightly. "He's a known fraudster. He's been linked to forged documents in multiple cases. No convictions yet, but plenty of suspicion." Caroline flipped through the papers, her eyes widening. The documents were detailed, filled with fake transactions, even forged signatures. Her signature. "These aren't mine," she said, her voice rising. "These are fabrications." Anna nodded. "We know, but we'll need proof. And fast." Caroline clenched her fists, anger replacing her fear. "He's trying to bury me in lies." Anna's expression hardened. "Then we make sure those lies collapse on him." For the next week, Caroline worked side by side with Anna and a forensic finance expert. They combed through every account, traced every document, and followed every digital trail. Night after night, Caroline stayed awake, fueled not by fear anymore but by determination. And slowly the truth began to surface. The fraudulent documents traced back to Ilomero's firm. The dates didn't line up, the signatures were off, and most importantly, there was no trail linking Caroline to any of it. Mark had thrown everything he had at her. But the truth, steady and solid, was on her side. A month later, Caroline walked into court. She sat beside Anna, dressed with quiet dignity, her shoulders straight, her hands steady. Across the room sat Mark, no longer polished and charming, but restless, bitter, and unprepared. The judge examined the evidence carefully. Caroline's team presented every document, every timestamp, every record. The fraudulent files crumbled under scrutiny. And when Ilomero himself failed to appear in court, the case unraveled completely. The ruling was swift. Mark's claims were dismissed. He was denied access to any part of Caroline's trust. Worse for him, he was ordered to cover her legal fees. Caroline closed her eyes as the gavel struck. Not from relief, but from finality. The storm was over. She had protected her life, her work, and her name. In the hallway afterward, Mark tried to approach her one last time. His voice was low, almost pleading. "You didn't have to do this." Caroline met his eyes without flinching. "No, Mark, you didn't have to do this." Then she turned and walked away, leaving him standing there with nothing. In the weeks that followed, she returned to her writing, to long walks in Central Park, to a life where peace replaced chaos. She didn't celebrate, she reflected. Victory, she realized, isn't always joy. Sometimes it's simply the absence of fear. And in that absence, she discovered something deeper. A truth every person should know. Trust is a gift, but control over your life is a right. Never hand over that power blindly, no matter how sweet the words sound or how warm the promises feel. Caroline had once believed she was living a fairy tale. Instead, she lived through betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and free. And, as her story shows, the quiet strength of standing your ground can echo louder than any storm.